All right, Don. So kind of thought of something fun here that we could do with the trade deadline being yesterday and our podcast talking about it. Let's walk through what it's like for Nyheim Hines on day one coming to Buffalo.
Sure.
So he requested a trade from the Colts. He got traded at about 3:50 p.m. yesterday. What is happening at One Bills Drive after that, once he's traded, once the league approves the trade?
Yeah, there is an all-out effort to ensure that he is brought to Buffalo at the team expense, of course, that night. It is critical that he's there that night so that they can pick him up at 6 o'clock in the morning the next day so that he's at practice. But just to back up a little bit, it's the team hotel. So they'll have someone from the pro personnel department that will contact him. There is a pro personnel department of 3 or 4 people that it's a branch of scouting. Most people think of scouting as being, college. They think of, and that's true. That's a big department. But equally important is a smaller scouting department for pro personnel that monitors the other 31 teams in the league, and who might be available,
and the street free agents.
Street free agents as well, right? Exactly. So they're all over this. Like when you said when you were in coaching, it would have been one of the coaching secretaries that made these arrangements. In my later years, it was a coordinator that would kind of be a one-stop shop on that first day, where they call them, they send them the itinerary, tell them to be on the plane, contact him, let me know when you land. They pick them up, they take them to the airport.
Do the Bills have a travel account with like a certain airline?
It depends. That tends to be a marketing agreement if the football people decide to accept it. In other words, if the marketing department can get a huge sponsorship from an airline, they'll come to the football department and say, hey, if they're smart, they'll say, I know that it's critical that you can depend on an airline to get your players here. Let's have a meeting. Can you talk with the representative from whoever it is, Continental, Delta, whoever, and explain your requirements, and you make sure that the airline has someone that's available essentially 18 hours a day.
Yeah.
Maybe 20 hours a day.
Sure.
For
6 months.
4 in the morning till midnight. That we need to get this guy on a plane today so that he's here.
He flies from Indy to Buffalo. He arrives last night, which he did. Somebody from pro personnel probably picks him up at the airport, takes him to the hotel.
Yep. Okay. And then that same person is likely the one to say, hey, I'm going to pick you up here in the lobby at 6 o'clock tomorrow morning. And we had at times we had a driver. We had Mike Nyland that did all the driving. They tend to be retired at whatever their previous job was, and all they do is drive to pick up players for those situations and take them to the doctors and back, and physical and back. Or if they're cut, that's the worst. And they have to be like zombies. We had Bob Schultz who did it for a while. Bob did a lot more than that. He drove them everywhere, and he was a great guy.
So this morning.
Yeah.
He gets there at 6 a.m.
He's picked up at 6, so he's probably there. It was 6:15.
First person he meets is?
He has to go to the trainers for a physical, and he has to pass that physical. Likely there would be a doctor there as well, and they review him, medical records. If you have a previous injury, like a shoulder injury, they'll test it to make sure he still has a full range of motion and strength in it, and that most likely there is. I mean, unless he had a new injury from playing the previous week, that gets a little messy. But, and then he passes the physical. If it's a deal where it's a sign and trade deal, or more correctly, a trade and sign deal, meaning the team that acquired him, in this case the Bills, if they restructured the contract in any way for salary cap reasons, we talked about that on our first episode, then he would have to sign that contract after he passed the physical. And so if he didn't, he doesn't have to. It skips a step. Then he meets then he goes to equipment, gets fitted for a new helmet. Number, jersey. He gets that, shown in the locker room. Meanwhile, his next stop is to go to the player engagement director, and they are the real one-stop shop for the player. They're told, hey, I'm your guy. Here's my number. Anything you ever need, ask me first. I will connect you with the right people.
So the player engagement director kind of acts as like a big brother.
Big brother, I like that. Yeah. I would say agent, but big brother is more accurate in terms of hey, welcome to the family.
Sure.
I'm here. I've been down this road before.
Usually a former player?
Yeah, Jerry Butler was like the pioneer of it. Jerry Butler was the first one I ever worked with. When the league told every team that it was mandated they have a player engagement director, Mr. Wilson said, I'll do it if I can have Jerry Butler. And, well, of course, he got Jerry Butler. And then Jerry left in the mid-'90s when Cleveland got their new team. They took him away because they said, you'll be our player engagement director and our wide receivers coach, which he still wanted to do. So then Martin Bayless came and Paul Lancaster after that, who was not a former player. He had a psychology degree. He was a good basketball player, but he was like my best friend there at the office. But they'd be the go-to to reconnect them.
It always reminded me of like Morgan Freeman in Shawshank. He's the guy who knew how to get things.
Knew how to get things. That's exactly right.
Okay, so we go from the player engagement director, and then obviously the guy who's been probably waiting for him the longest, it was the position coach.
Position coach is chomping at the bit. They are pacing their office. They can't wait to get their hands on the guy and figuratively and say, hey, here's how we're going to do things. This is what the expectations are of you. But they at least know if they can't connect with the player during those necessary steps, they'll at least see him at practice and then try to build a very fast trust and relationship there.
All the while, obviously, he needs to eat.
Yes, the team has a cafeteria open that they'll show him the cafeteria to have breakfast and lunch.
We're going to talk about the cafeteria on a future episode. There's some good stories in the cafeteria.
Yeah, no, the cafeteria was nice. It was a great perk for the staff, but for the players, it was not a perk. It was the team, the strength and conditioning coaches who handle nutrition, require that the players maintain a certain level of caloric intake, especially fluids, but they can't. It's not just like, I'm not hungry. I mean, of course he's hungry, but they make sure that they're fueled up in a way that they're not going to pass out or have cramps at practice.
So after position coach possibly, and then eating lunch, it's time for practice. Probably pops in with the strength and conditioning guys, right, to get a idea of like a workout regimen.
They've been there.
Probably avoid the bod pod during the season.
The bod pod is really that measures the fat composition, the muscle to fat ratio. That they all do that in April when they first come back, and I'm
terrifying. Terrifying.
Yeah.
That was Jamie Nails' nemesis.
Jamie Nails, okay, yeah, he would not left a lot of room. Yeah, I see him kind of all the flesh kind of pressed and against the window.
So strength guys, practice happens, and then the main event. They finally come to see you.
Well, listen, I'm barely a day one required stop, but at least I was a day one stop. But I was like at the end of the day. I would explain to them how they get paid, where they get paid, how to direct deposit. And explain to do what happens if they get hurt. To basically tell the trainers. But the worst thing that could happen is if they get injured. All of the injuries that happen when they're playing, however they happen, are workers' comp. If they put it on their personal health insurance, it's a disaster to undo.
Okay, so their families. Their wife, their kids, obviously they've picked up and left the day before. What happens with them moving, their belongings, their families? Important
distinction for the trade. 90 to 95% of players acquired are acquired as a free agent of some kind. So like you said, street free agent, restricted, unrestricted. For none of those transactions is the team acquiring the player responsible for their move. However, for the 5, maybe 10% of the players that are acquired by trade, the team's responsible for paying for their move. So I help them with that too. So a good agent will tell the player, hey, remind them that they're supposed to pay for that. I always tried to stay ahead, and usually they just tell me to call their wife and make the arrangements, which I was happy to do. There were some players or agents that forgot to tell the player that the team was supposed to pay for it, and I wanted to stay. I didn't want to get a surprise later on, so I would go to the player and say, "Hey, I haven't seen anything for your trade, your moving," and he'd be like, "Oh, you're supposed to pay for that?" I'm like, "Yeah," according to the CBA. So
you became their favorite player.
Oh yeah,
your favorite person in the office.
They like that because they would. It's just all right. Find your receipts and bring them in, and I'm just going to cut you a check.
That's day one for a new player like Nyheim Hines.
And there's more, but those are the main events that most players should go through on a day one.